They control the narrative. Crop circles, orbs, uh-oh. And who shows up? NASA and the CIA.
Oh, it's not as poopy over here.
It's almost a donut shape.
It is very donut shaped. It reminds me of the last episode, Allie. So we are in the hometown of Port Townsend here, just doing some editing, kind of taking the afternoon off. It's been unseasonably clear and warm for the Pacific Northwest. For the most part, we've just been enjoying taking a sigh of relief from winter.
Yeah. We actually just ran into an OSD attendees.
Yeah, it's a small town, literally just standing right there. It's always shocking that people kind of remember something that we're doing. And so for everybody out there that's watching our stuff, thank you. We had a really interesting interview with a speaker, presenter, field experiencer for Olympic Strange Days 2025 and 2026, Maurene Morgan. That was just a couple of days ago. Now we have time to kind of reflect on what Maurene is going to talk to you about coming up in this episode. So what were your takeaways sitting down with Maurene in her house?
Well, I think I was just excited to kind of talk to her about, her years of experience as a ufologist and working with MUFON, specifically I think it was the experiencer research team. I really wanted to ask her questions specifically about, abductees and if there are patterns or connections between the people that have these kinds of experiences. And she had them. The Marian apparition stuff that we have heard her do a lecture about, it's cool to see her view, her perception of that kind of shift a little bit.
Yeah, just in the last 4 months, she's had a pretty big shift on Chris Bledsoe in particular and his prophecies about basically a Virgin Mary apparition type, which dates back to, the dawn of Mary, right? And what people are seeing in connection to UFO events. And that's not where I met Maurene at all. When I initially met her, she was a nuts and bolts kind of gal as far as UFOs are concerned, and talking about craft and digging into experiences as it relates to what abductees go through. So that's what I know Maurene for, is a vivacious personality that people seem to trust and seek out, because pretty much wherever Maurene goes, she brings a crowd with her. She invites a pretty big crowd with her. So to sit back and watch you interview Maurene in her house was a pleasure. And so that's what you're going to see is our hour-long conversation pretty much with Maurene about what she has going on as current research, where she's at with the Bledsoe prophecy, and what she thinks as far as this alien agenda. Is it prophecy, or is there something else maybe coming around the corner that I forget how she called it. She called it dark forces, I think. I think she used the word dark forces. Oh, and she also talks about these incredible megalithic structures that she uncovered some over 30 years ago. She traveled the globe.
Yeah, but she can't seem to forget about them, because she's like, nobody has really given them a real...
And they're weird.
Yeah, a real chance for being looked at or understood. And she shows a couple of pictures, but she's basically telling us, and we got to see pictures more afterwards of these different structures, and they're insane. So come to OSD to see her lecture and get the full scoop on it.
Yeah, spend 3 days out in the woods with us. October, Maurene's gonna go. Who knows where she'll be with her research, but it's just a lot to see and discover with Maurene Morgan. This is really distracting though. This view is, once you go off this pier, in fact, I think periodically, Allie, people once a year make their own boats in their garage, and they have a contest to see who can first get to Alaska, on their own
really?
self-powered boat, so no engines, just foot traffic.
sailboats?
No, like they have to kick paddle and
my
stuff and
gosh.
row their way to Alaska, and there's like a grand prize, a financial prize. You want to try?
Yeah, let's do it.
Next year, an OSD boat off this pier. Well, enjoy this new style, this new format, long format of our interview with Maurene Morgan.
So, Maurene, we did a little bit of an intro before we got here, letting people know that you are ex-MUFON, that you were the state director for years, that you've been a big public figure in ufology, especially around Washington. Is there anything else that you would like people to know about your experience or what brought you into this subject?
Well, I have never seen a UFO. And I don't know that I am an experiencer that I know about, even though there have been a few events that have happened in my life that's hard to explain. But I grew up with a family ghost. There was a ghost in my grandmother's house. And various family members would see the shrouded figure gliding up the stairwell and disappearing up in the upstairs closet. So my initial interest in the paranormal was more around ghosts and ghost hunting. And when I first arrived in Port Townsend, I gravitated to a ghost hunting group. And then it wasn't long after that I relocated from Iowa, from Cedar Rapids, about 14 years ago now. And when I came out here, I would listen to like Ancient Aliens, and I'd watch Ancient Aliens, and I'd listen to Coast. But other than that, I didn't have a huge interest in UFOs. It was more still the paranormal, ghosts, that thing. But not long after I moved here, I met a couple of women who just opened up to me. After I think I happened to ask her, if she happened to listen to like a Coast to Coast episode, because there was a really interesting episode on there. And she just like opened up and started telling me all about her own experiences with the little beings in her room. That's when I realized that instead of backing off, I'm one of those people that would say, well, tell me more. Then what happened? And it just like started flooding out. And it wasn't very long after that. And that's what initially got me to look into MUFON and becoming a certified UFO investigator, was based on, I was trying to understand her experience. So anyway, this, within a year, I met a woman when I was volunteering down at the food bank, and she was coming through, and she was a nurse. She happened to mention that she was looking for a job as a nurse, and I happened to be a former resume writer. So I said, hey, come over to my apartment. I'll write a resume for you. So she comes over, and I have my MUFON manual open. And she just looks at it and just blanches. And then this extraordinary story came out of her, an abduction experience she had with her son. And that is what really opened up this whole phenomena with abductions, or the experiencer end of the phenomena. After I was a MUFON certified UFO investigator, and then a state section director, and then my predecessor, the previous Washington MUFON state director, James Clarkson, then stepped down and recommended that I take over. So that's when I became the Washington MUFON State Director in 2016, which was interesting because I was one of the few state directors who was also on MUFON's experiencer research team. So I was not only getting all of the reports, but also, would be talking to, I suppose over all those years, probably hundreds of experiencers. My God, it's like some of the credibility of these people and the stories that they tell. What in the world is reality? I don't think we have a clue what reality is. And so I gradually left the whole ghost hunting area of it, particularly after the local ghost hunter took one of the ghosts home, a black energy home with her, and then she got out of it. So anyway, I felt it was actually safer to be around ETs and UFOs than it was the ghost hunting world. Before I came to Port Townsend, I had a peripheral interest in UFOs so far as it was almost like, not exactly entertainment, but it would be listening to Coast and watching Ancient Aliens. But once I came here and I started meeting these extraordinary people who are almost coming out of the woodwork and talking to me, and it's like, sometimes I wonder if they somehow intuited that I would be somebody who would again say, tell me more, versus backing off. And then I used to have then I started, God, this must have been about 2000, again, not long after I got here, I started the Olympic UFO meetup, a monthly meetup here, and that went on for about 6 years until COVID. But it was really wonderful because I was able to gain a lot of leadership skills. Organizing the meetup every month. Either I had to present a program, I had to have somebody present a program, sending out the notices, just all of the follow-up involved with it. So it's, and I had people coming, 40, 50 people that would come every single month, meeting here in Port Townsend, and they would be coming over from the Seattle area. They were coming up. I had one guy who would ride his motorcycle up from Aberdeen. Another person who would come down from Bellingham, because this was before SUFON. SUFON at that point was kind of quiet. So I was essentially the only UFO group in the state of Washington. And so people would come, and it gave me a great opportunity, again, to learn leadership skills and organizing these monthly meetings. So then when I became the MUFON state director, then I sort of transferred those skills to MUFON, and we started, holding meetings all over the state, and particularly on the east side of the state. So it was, and then of course, because I would be doing presentations, for both my Olympic UFO group and for MUFON, then that gave me the confidence to speak at conferences like, Ocean Shores, the Ocean Shores UFO Summit. It's been an interesting growth period. I can tell you that 10, 15 years ago, I could not in my life have envisioned where my life has taken me since then. It was almost like a switch went off. And it was like it turned something on that was basically in hibernation for the previous years of my life. There's been a real interesting, I would say, past 10 years.
You did it was the MUFON Experiencer Research Team? Is that correct?
Yeah, MUFON had two arms. They had the UFO investigative arm where people would report sightings, and then I would assign any one of 15 different investigators to investigate that particular sighting report. And it was basically the nuts and bolts, interviewing the witness, and how fast was it, how big was it, where was it in the sky. Again, a very nuts and bolts perspective on it.
Yeah.
But they also had their Experiencer resource team that was headed by Kathleen Martin. If you know, she's Betty and Barney Hill's niece, who took over basically she became like the world's authority on the whole experiencer phenomena after Betty and Barney Hill passed away. And she headed the team, and there were, maybe 30 different team members on there, so that people who had some kind of anomalous phenomenon, whether, they saw where they wanted to, generally it was somebody who had some kind of a personal experience, whether it was, seeing a UFO and needing to talk about it, seeing beings in their rooms, anomalous phenomena,
missing time.
and then they would request to speak to somebody on the team. So we would then get the names and the contact information, and then we would then contact them and talk to them. And again, just some of the most extraordinary stories, that people, very credible people experience. And often, I can tell you that virtually without exception, I would pick up the phone, and the first words out of their mouth would be, "You're going to think I'm crazy." And that to me is a real indictment against how closed we are off in this culture, where these people have experienced something. And often, it's happened sometime previous in their lives, and it's been held in. They haven't been able to talk about it because of ridicule. Whether it's from their family, their spouse, their church, their community, their workplace, and and it would be often all they needed to do was to talk about it to somebody, and often it would be all I would have to do is be on the phone and then say, and then what happened? How did it make you feel? And they would just go for like 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours, letting it out. And then once they had aired to somebody who was non-judgmental, and and often I could say, that I've heard that before. You're not alone. Others have experienced the same kind of thing. Never leading them on, but it's like you could just almost hear this huge sigh of relief. They got it off their shoulders, and then they could, for the most part, I didn't hear from them again. They could go on with their lives. But I mean, some of these, and I told some of these stories at the Bigfoot event. How many people are out there who have experienced these kinds of phenomena that can't come out? These are the lucky ones, the ones who have been able to come out and talk about it, and particularly to somebody who's in a UFO experience or research or a resource, or I should say a support group, or to somebody, say, on MUFON's experience or research team, be able to speak about it. All those people out there, I just wonder how many people have had lives that have been a train wreck because they have experienced things that are not explainable, and they've never been able to open up without either being ridiculed, put down, slapped, and especially children. I can't tell you how many people would report, before anything else had happened in their lives, they would see little beings in their bedrooms. And sometimes their parents would walk in because they would hear things happening, and here they were in their crib having a conversation to somebody who's not there. So often these events would be verified by parents, who would realize that they were speaking to something or someone. But often these experiences start happening in their early childhood, and then would come like Whitley Strieber. Then events would start up big time later in their lives. But often they had gone sometimes for decades, never being able to open up and talk about these world-shaking events that happened to them. And it's and then often say again, these little kids, and I've often wondered with little kids when they have an invisible friend, or they have these beings in their rooms, and they report seeing orbs or whatever in their rooms, and then they're told, you were just dreaming, stop lying, sometimes get punished. And I came up with this theory with skeptics, particularly debunkers. The more harshly they were punished for seeing these things and bringing it up, mommy, daddy, I saw grandma in the, by my bed, whatever. The more harshly they were punished, the more firmly they became a debunker, and they can't go there because it hurts to go there. Anyway, that's my own theory. If the worst that they get is that, you must have been dreaming, that's one thing. But I know a lot of kids were, physically abused. They were slapped around. They were punished. They were told they were lying. It's a real indictment with our culture that we are so closed off, to so many experiences that you just can't even go there.
Is there within, like, say, maybe adult experiencers, did you notice any kind of connected aspects, like a repeated pattern or?
Well, that is one of the things that I found really kind of affirming, in that it's like most of them had experiences in common, some experiences in common, but when they would report things that were totally unlike anything I had ever heard before, that's when I thought, this is the real deal. They are not parroting something they heard on Ancient Aliens or on Coast to Coast or in one of the many, many books that are out there. When I would hear something that would go, oh my God, where did that come from? The patterns, I was going to say, Oh yes, the patterns. Two of the things that we all agreed on is that experience the vast majority of experiencers had either experienced childhood trauma, be it abuse, neglect, some kind of child trauma. And often it was extreme child abuse. And that's when I began to think, well, my God, what are we doing with our children here? And then, in fact, when the conversation started, a lot of us would just automatically start off with these two questions, have you ever experienced any childhood trauma? And you could just hear the phone go dead. And then they would start talking about it. And then often, what you would hear was just absolutely heartbreaking. And I'll think of the other thing in the moment.
The individuals having an experience that was unique to them was almost in and of itself a pattern, like many people.
That was a pattern,
yeah.
But again, the big pattern is this childhood trauma. And we theorized that it's because when children experience trauma, they'll often go into an altered state in which to escape the untenable. And as you may realize that even with Stephen Greer, often you go in, it's encouraged that you go into a meditative state, you clear your mind, you go into an altered state before you start sky watching. Mm-hmm. Well, I think these children may have learned to go into basically an altered meditative state, and that either opened up, thinned the veil, or allowed things to come through.
Mm-hmm. Or disassociate.
Or disassociate, that's right, disassociate, because what they were experiencing was beyond what they could handle. And it either, again, sort of thinned the veil, or it, sometimes we wondered if it didn't open the veil.
Wow.
So yeah, I think that was the single most there's another thing that I would ask, and I'll remember it at some point here, but
yeah.
That was really the big one.
Is there anything else specific in your experience talking to abductees that you find just more fascinating, or something you didn't expect to find?
I guess one of the things that really amazes me is how when people experience this kind of anomalous phenomena, particularly when it starts off at a young age, how they even manage to cope with some kind of reality, how they even manage to live normal lives. And often, and again, I might have somebody who's 70 years old, who's disclosing something that happened even in his childhood, who for the first time, because it's not, I would say probably thanks to ancient aliens, it's now acceptable to talk about these things. So now they can actually come out and bring out these experiences from decades ago. But the thing that I guess amazes me is how people have managed to somehow put together a normal life in spite of having these weird things having happened to them, sometimes throughout their lives. And and again, I consider those people to be the lucky ones. It's the ones who haven't been able to talk about it, who haven't even been able to reconcile with it, who I suspect then become alcoholics, again, their lives become a train wreck because they've got post-traumatic stress. That was the other one. To a person, they suffered post-traumatic stress one way or another. Whether it was sleep disorders, whether it was, again, in a whole myriad of different ways, and unfortunately, if somebody is attacked, if a woman is, if you suffered as a child, you can go to therapists, you can go to psychologists, you can get professional help to deal with it. But people who experience this kind of phenomena, there's no place to go. It's this ongoing, underlying, almost like chronic post-traumatic stress, I mean, that you can pick up in when you interview them. And I think sometimes it's kind of like you can kind of alleviate a little bit once they realize that they're not alone and they're not crazy and other people have experienced the same kinds of things. But yes, it's childhood abuse and post-traumatic trauma.
Okay.
So, and again, unlike people who have suffered some kind of acceptable trauma, these people go unhelped.
I feel like we have to talk about the Marian apparitions. That's something that you've been working on quite a bit for how many years now?
Well, actually, I've had a long interest in the ancient goddesses, the ancient goddess cultures. And there's a whole bunch of books here. But anyway, it wasn't until Chris Bledsoe's story came out. And even though it was sort of being bantered around, ever since like 2010, 2011, particularly after he had the visitations in 2012, 2013. His story was out there. For anybody who isn't aware, Chris Bledsoe is a man who lives in North Carolina, who had, in 2007, had an abduction event, missing time, in which not only he saw these little beings, his son saw the little beings, he had 3 construction co-workers who also saw many of the UFOs that appeared. So he had, this is an extraordinary story, and it's probably the most investigated and validated experiencer story on Earth right now. But in 2012 and 2013, he had visitations from a lady. He calls her the Lady in White. And she identified herself as Hathor, an Egyptian goddess, and she gave him prophecies that, first of all, we have to clean up our act here or we're gone. The earth has been programmed to jettison that which threatens it. That the male energy over the centuries, over millennia, has been so violent that it's going to be replaced. The divine feminine is going to return, and women are basically going to ascend in power. And this is going to take place when the Regulus, the red star Regulus, which is the king star, which appears in the constellation Leo, shines into the eyes of the Sphinx at dawn. And astronomers are, there seems to be some date whether this is going to be happening like on the spring equinox, like March 20th, 2026, 2 months from now, or in October. So anyway, she gave this prophecy. She appeared 2 times, but she gave the prophecy that there were going to be these great changes to take place in supposedly in 2026. Although there are some people again who are leaking in 2027, but imminent. So I did a presentation on the Chris Bledsoe experience with the Marian. They're called Marian apparitions because they appear, they're often they appear like the Blessed Virgin Mary. And this is a phenomenon that's been going on for the past 2,000 years with thousands of reports, but they're called Marian apparitions because generally these apparitions are assumed to be an appearance of the Blessed Virgin Mary. So I started to look into this phenomenon of the Marian apparitions, trying to get a handle on what's this all about. So I started to read up about it, found some books, Ingo Swann's book on the Great Apparitions of Mary, UFOs, alien sightings and Marian apparitions, UFOs and alien contacts in Christian history, extraterrestrial interference in the cult of the Virgin Mary. I started getting into this stuff, and it's like a whole world opened up. And I soon discovered that there, over the past 2,000 years, there have been over 2,000 reports of these Marian apparitions, starting in 40 AD with Mother Mary bilocating from Nazareth to Spain. Wow. And she supposedly was living in Nazareth with, was it John the Baptist? When she appeared in Spain to the apostle James. Anyway, he had gone to Spain to evangelize the pagans in Spain, and was coming up with a lot of, he was not getting very far. He was coming up with a lot of resistance. So Mother Mary appeared in Zaragoza, Spain, and encouraged him to continue. And then she said, I want you to build a shrine or a chapel right here, which he did. And the locals, the word went out, and so many of the Spaniards were so impressed with this miraculous sighting that they converted to Christianity. So that was the first thing that alerted me to, there's something about these that needs to be looked into. And I started looking into the whole series and realized that ever since Mary's appearance, supposed appearance in 40 AD, that not only has she made demands, I want a chapel or a shrine to build in this particular spot, and I want it named after me. They would never identify themselves as Mary, but would have like the appearance of Mary. And when asked to identify themselves, they would say, well, you can call me, the Lady of Fatima, or the Lady of Guadalupe, or the Lady of the Snows, the Lady of Good Peace, on and on. But never would identify themselves as Mary. And I started looking into this whole phenomenon and finding out that, oh my God, just looking at, I looked briefly at the 400 Marian apparitions that were investigated thoroughly by the Vatican, and then I picked out like 40 of what seemed to be some of the most interesting ones. And I started picking up this pattern of, first of all, these phenomena, and this includes Chris Bledsoe's, that's current, were basically dictating the course of human history through these appearances. And that they would almost always, except in the case of Chris Bledsoe, they would almost always demand that a shrine or a chapel be built in a spot, and then like these subtle, almost like passive-aggressive threats if they don't do them. And then over the centuries, there are now basilicas, shrines, chapels from all over the world, and they're all dedicated to Mary, not to Jesus, not to God, to Mary. And they get something like 40 million pilgrims a year going to these places. There's about 4 million people, pilgrims a year go to the shrine now in Zaragoza, Spain, where Mother Mary first appeared. And you start to think, well, my God, why would she insist that these chapels to be built in all these different places, hundreds of different places, in her name? And some of them were in the most awful, out in the middle of nowhere places. Fatima, Lourdes, where the Guadalupe, they're in the middle of nowhere. And these shrines would be built, some of them, they're just palaces now, and people flock by the millions to these places. And I began to wonder, well, gee, is this to bring people together to harvest this heightened, intensive energy, these intensive emotions? You bring in 20 million, I think there are, which one? I think it's Lady of Fatima. Gets 20 million visitors, pilgrims a year, all in this heightened state of emotions. Could they be bringing people in to, basically to harvest this energy? And then often you would find that, say, with the Lady of Fatima or the Lady of Lourdes, and then even the Lady of Guadalupe, So particularly just the Lady of Fatima, which is Portugal, and the Lady of Guadalupe, which is also, that's Portugal. After millennia of being under the thumb of the Catholic Church, the people were basically rising up and saying, we've had enough, and moving away. These appearances would appear, and they'd all come running back. And it was like this would be happening over and over and over again. It was like, and then with the Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, she appeared in 1531 near Mexico City to an Aztec peasant who had just recently come under the influence of, the bishops, the Spanish, the Catholic bishops that were sent there, and she appeared to him, and as a result of that appearance, some 9 million Aztecs converted to Catholicism. But at the same time, the church held, like, basically, the native peoples in such disdain. It's been estimated that within 20 years, 20 million people died after the Spanish and the Portuguese went to the New World. Within 20 years, 20 million people died. So so basically, the Lady of Guadalupe is the reason that Latin America, Mexico and Latin America are Catholic, despite the fact that the Catholic Church treated the natives with absolute disdain. And also and you have to wonder, so you start seeing these influences all over the world.
Has anybody theorized that this could be potentially like an extraterrestrial race?
Absolutely. There's thousands of books, papers, whatever, written, YouTube videos, you name it, on the Marian apparitions. Mm-hmm. And they're either done, for the most part, like 99% of them are done seen through a religious lens. And there's a small portion of them that are seen sort of like through a New Age, kind of like woo-woo lens, that they're here to raise our vibrations, we're going to ascend, whatever. Yeah. But I came across a couple of these books and started thinking, I have been looking at how over history, incident after incident, where these apparitions have basically dictated history. And so, again, not necessarily in a good way. And I really started to think, is this all part of some kind of, is it part of an ultra-dimensional, interdimensional phenomena? Yeah. This goes, I firmly believe it has nothing to do with the Blessed Virgin Mary. And because so often, because she won't even identify, and it's always a woman, exquisitely beautiful, and I think because that calms people. Mm-hmm. And so it's and particularly in the for the most part, they all appeared in countries that were too Catholics or in countries that were largely Catholic. And then they would be, after the visitation, and then the event would be then taken to like the local priest, to the bishop, and then it would be, then from that point on, it basically disappeared into under like a Catholic umbrella. That's like the 400 cases that the Vatican really investigated. Well, still, nonetheless, they're only validated if they uphold a positive Catholic perspective. So I suddenly started to find that there were a handful of people around the world who were looking at through the eyes of like UFO investigators, the paranormal, and started to see that, oh my God, you start looking at these, say the Lady of Fatima, start looking at these through the eyes of a UFO investigator, and it was clearly a UFO event. Mm-hmm. I mean, absolutely, no question about it. And so you begin to wonder, who is behind the manipulation of human history, going back thousands of years? And it's like, I began to get, and then I began to look at even the Chris Bledsoe story. You know, I said, now is his experience with her positive? You know, because she said she has appeared many times before as the Lady of Fatima or the Lady of Guadalupe. Mm-hmm. And if I'm looking at these past appearances as, I don't see this as a good thing. And also this whole idea that, you know, they almost, except in the exception of Chris Bledsoe, who by the way was Pentecostal, he was one of the rarest exceptions that he was not Catholic. He was Pentecostal holiness, but that also, he was in a religion that was really open to the paranormal. I mean, it's a very, I think he was chosen. Well, clearly he had experiences starting in childhood, but I think one of the reasons why he was chosen is because it could take it out of the realm of the Catholic Church. And because the Pentecostal holiness community wanted nothing to do with it. They considered it demonic. It wasn't like he could take it to them. So then he makes a MUFON report, and who shows up? NASA and the CIA. I mean, he's had every intel in around the world show up at his door. And that to me said, well, my God, just what is happening here? It's like, I think it was a deliberate move on the part of this Marian apparition to, again, take it away from the Catholic Church and put it in an area where, again, his religion would be out because they consider it demonic. And she even said, I will put you in contact with the people you need to know, which was, again, the NASA, which is CIA, you know, the NRO, the NSA, I mean, you name it, FBI, the Air Force. Well, what is the connection? And I began to take a really sort of like an Amish perspective in that Chris Bledsoe, instead of being something like, you know, finally, like this, like I sort of like, went aside, I went out from this whole idea that this was going to be, you know, bluebirds and daisies, thinking, what have we got ahead of us? Is this more manipulating human history? So yeah, I really started looking at this whole phenomena through the eyes of somebody who's looking at this as, this is an interdimensional, extra-dimensional, this is, and I'm sure it includes Bigfoot, includes ghosts, it includes crop circles, orbs, I mean, the whole kit and caboodle. You know, there's some kind of like almost theory of everything for this kind of phenomena, of which these Marian apparitions is only a part of it. And all these other things seem to fit into it, you know, fit into that same theory of everything. And I am sure the powers that be are perfectly aware of this. They have known about the lady's prophecy probably since the 1940s, after the paperclip Nazis were brought over. Hitler was obsessed with the occult, and he sent researchers all over the world to basically dig up everything he could about the occult so it could be brought back and weaponized. And then the same Nazis were brought over under that paperclip program, or it was called paperclip, and then basically embedded in, you know, they founded NASA, you know, they were basically founded the CIA, embedded right into the very core of American society. And you have to think, my God, I'm sure there were powers that be that knew this prophecy was coming. And then I keep wondering, was this whole thing with Chris Bledsoe a psyop so that the Marian apparition would appear? They already know that something is going to happen in 2026 by using like a Project Bluebeam kind of phenomenon, make this thing appear. The CIA swoops in, Intel swoops in, takes over the narrative, so when this big event does happen, sometime between like March 20th, October whatever, and maybe even into 2027, they control the narrative. And I thought, my good God.
So when it comes to ushering in the apocalypse, right? This is something that a lot of Judeo-Christians follow up on, is this: the apocalypse is coming. One of the things I think that was talked about at Secrets at Skinwalker Ranch and, the insiders from the Pentagon, is that there is a certain religious fundamentalist group that thought, hey, we shouldn't look into this phenomenon because it's this, that, or the other, demons, witches. But at the same time, there's this other group that wants to usher in this apocalypse by going to World War III.
There's all of these different elements. It's like, the Collins elite, for example, within, this group of ultra-conservative Christians within the U.S. government, the military, whatever, who consider this whole anything to do with UFOs, ET, the Marian apparitions, it doesn't matter, orbs, the whole thing, as demonic. And they don't want anyone to go anywhere near it. But I'm at the point now, instead of automatically dismissing that, I'm just wondering if there isn't an element in there somewhere. When you start looking at how these Marian apparitions have basically dictated our history through those appearances over the last 2,000 years, you have to wonder, well, who is behind it? And is there a demonic, I don't know if demonic, because that's kind of a loaded word, but if there isn't, she used the word, the Chris Bledsoe's lady used the word, there's a dark force at the helm of humanity who's dictating all of this. So I would use the term, this dark force. Somewhere there is a dark force, and I'm just wondering, at what point is this dark force even behind these Marian apparitions that have happened over the last 2,000 years? But this sort of gets you, this is a real plunge down the rabbit hole, because it's dark, it's dank, it's deep, and the light, if there is a light, it's way down there, and then there's all these offshoots that go off it. But once I start looking into this whole phenomena through the eyes of a UFO investigator versus through the religious eyes or New Age eyes, it's like, oh my God, this is something that's worthy of looking into, spending some time on.
Yeah.
So that's the direction I'm going in now, is that spending time research and trying to think this damn thing out. I can count the number of people around the world I have found who are looking at Marian apparitions through the eyes of a UFO investigator.
It definitely seems like there's an agenda.
That's right. And it may not be a good agenda. I can just, looking back through history, I can see so many instances where it seemed as though the appearances were bolstering the Catholic Church. And yet you look at the Catholic Church, the history of the Catholic Church, and particularly with its impact on the New World, and it was simply catastrophic. So you have to wonder, if she was going to be bolstering, and even her appearances over Poland, where she basically conquered, sent the communists back, but bolstered the Catholic Church, why at the same time wasn't she telling, you got to clean up your act? It's like supporting a particular institution. And then I started thinking, well, what do the I don't know. There are very few appearances that I know of to the Muslims or even the Hindus, other religions. But you have to wonder, and then very few to Protestants. Chris Bledsoe is a glaring anomaly. And you have to think, well, what does the Catholic Church have that would have given them the incentive to support it? And one thing is ironclad control. You have, it's like, the Catholic Church, it's like they control, it's a very controlling religion. Totally. And so it just seemed to me, if you wanted to go through an institution that was most able over millennia to exert control, you support the Catholic Church. So anyway, that's They're just this is just I'm just beginning to get into this whole phenomena, and you can kind of see how the whole thing with MUFON UFO investigations, which all nuts and bolts. I mean, that to me is so boring. I mean, it is. I mean, and I sometimes wonder if the push to keep UFOs in the being seen as nuts and bolts. You see back engineering, biologics, basically the propulsion is all about the nuts and bolts. And I just wonder if this hasn't been a narrative that's been foisted on us for the last 70 years in order to keep us looking here when the powers that be know good and well, the real action is over here. And unfortunately, I think organizations like MUFON, they're basically part of that narrative. Again, it was I am so grateful to be out of there because it frees me up to go into areas that I probably never would have gone into as long as I was wrapped up in this whole basically the whole nuts and bolts UFO investigation. UFOs are only a small part of this whole phenomena. And then with Chris Bledsoe, almost all of this phenomena first appeared as orbs, as plasmoids. And you have to think, well, my God, plasmoids are almost like a dirty word in the standard UFO world. And I suspect it's the same thing with the Bigfoot world, the Bigfoot world. You just can't even go there. And yet the Chris Bledsoe story makes it perfectly clear that that's probably the root of everything. That first there's the orbs, out of which comes the lady, out of which comes the little beings, out of which comes the UFOs. It's like that, and I'm just wondering if, say, even with, I think one of the last dictates that came down from on high with MUFON, it's like they didn't even want us to go there. They didn't. I mean, orbs. You send that. Basically, send that to the paranormal people. And I'm just wondering, is that to keep their investigators focused on the nuts and bolts when the real action's over here? I'm just really excited right now that there's like this whole new world is opening up for me that is basically cutting edge because there's so few people in the world who are even looking at a phenomena like the Marian apparitions through the eyes of a UFO investigator.
Can you speak, Maureen, to some of the physical evidence that this phenomena exists?
For a piece of physical evidence, after Chris Bledsoe reported his experience to MUFON and the NASA, the CIA, all those people showed up, he had a very unusual visitor, Tim Tyler, who was he was one of the principals at the NASA launch facility down in Florida. Big. I mean, he made an appearance at Chris Bledsoe's house, unannounced, showed tags from literally every intel agency in the U.S. government. He brought a piece of material, and he first asked all of Chris Bledsoe's family just to put it in their hands and see what happened. And they all had like a mild reaction, but nothing dramatic. They put it in Chris Bledsoe's hand, and it almost electrocuted him. And this Tim Tyler, again, this guy is big, said that that this was a piece of material that was not from this world. And then he made a very interesting comment to Chris Bledsoe when he said it came from a galaxy 500 million light years from not here. And unless he was just fibbing, how would he know where it came from? Chris Bledsoe went to the Monroe Institute. So then it could be tested, his response to the same material could be retested there, and he essentially had the same experience at the Monroe Institute. I would say that is real, that is real hard evidence that there is material here, and unless this Tim Tyler was lying to Chris Bledsoe, they know it comes from someplace far, far, far away. And apparently he knew where it came from. What I find most interesting is that, again, after the Chris Bledsoe incident, how intel from around the world just basically swarmed his place. So this is clearly something they're taking very, very, very seriously. I just have to think that, again, they have known that this prophecy was going to happen for probably 70 years, and they swarmed in there to control the narrative.
Is there any chance that he's being set up, and that's why they're swarming in to control a patsy?
Well, see, I have given that some thought because, and again, all of the previous sightings, I mean, even if you just take the 400 that the Vatican has investigated, and it's always she's always exquisitely beautiful, never identifies herself. And again, she'll say, you can call me, the Lady of Guadalupe, or you can call me the Lady of Snows, or the Lady of all nations, whatever. Never identifies herself. It's her Marian appearance that people assume that's who she is because of her appearance. So the lady shows up to Chris Bledsoe, and she comes right out and says, I am Hathor, a Greek goddess. But then she said that she is the creator of the universe. She was there before the beginning. Essentially, she's saying she's God. And again, this is so out of keeping with all the others that have taken place before. And because it was she clearly brought in intel. It's the first time, after I started thinking about this, then this being a Project Bluebeam kind of psyop became feasible. If the CIA could have projected Jesus over Cuba in the 1960s, they could project the lady over Chris Bledsoe in the 2000s. And again, to take this out of the realm of the Catholic Church, you call her Hathor. So that that way you completely bypassed, again, the Catholic Church and their interpretation of it, and it leaves it squarely in the hands of intel. And it just, I would not be at all surprised. Oh, and then what really shocked me is that the other day do you ever listen to Bledsoe Said So? Right, Chris Bledsoe's son Ryan has been Chris Bledsoe's voice on YouTube, and he has, I think it's maybe like a weekly program that's called Bledsoe Said So, in which he either does a commentary or he interviews somebody. So anyway, he was talking with a friend on the last show, and he came out and said, and I'm paraphrasing him, that basically everything negative that experiencers say happened is bunk. Doesn't happen. I mean, sort of like the Greer perspective. And I'm thinking, I have talked to, I would say, dozens and dozens of experiencers who've had very negative experiences that left them traumatized, and in many cases left them with autoimmune conditions that they did not have before. And so Ryan Bledsoe came out and said, there's absolutely nothing negative to any of these experiences. These I would say you'd have to think that, that would be the whole like the UFO contactee experiencer phenomenon. And I thought, my God, first of all, is he being set up to say that? So this, it really shocked. First of all, Bledsoe, by having Bledsoe experience this lady in white, rather than somebody with another religion, it put it squarely in the hands of the CIA and intel. And are they feeding him, him and his son, his family, this information that, that all of the experiencers who had anything negative to say about their experience, that's all, they've just imagined it. Suddenly I began to say, there's something about this I do not like. I'm beginning to see the setup.
I've been seeing other people bring that specific
Yeah.
episode up and talk about how it's making them question
Yeah.
everything kind of up to date because they just didn't jive with,
Yeah.
you know.
See, I have no doubt that he and his family are saying the absolute truth. Everything has happened. It's a very real phenomenon. It's exactly the way they have reported it. But what are they reporting? This is, a year ago, at the when I gave the Chris Bledsoe presentation at the 2025 Ocean Shores UFO Summit. I mean, I was totally into this whole, the lady in white was going to come basically save the world. And it's interesting that in less than a year, within 6 months, I was already picking up information that was undermining that whole scenario. And but it really makes me feel good that, I can take a stance at one time and then change my opinion based on new information. So the next presentation I do will probably be something on, just what is going on with this. Is the Chris Bledsoe story a psyop?
Okay, so before the Marian apparitions, before MUFON, before Port Townsend, there was a time in your life in the 70s when you were sailing.
I was sailing, and again, first crewed on a square rigger from the Canary Islands to Barbados, and then got off of that and got a job crewing on the Lord Jim. We ended up being partners for 17 years. Our last charter on the boat was with Playboy magazine with all their models and photographers. I mean, anyway, then he sold the boat and we got a smaller boat, a 40-foot boat that we then ended up getting all fitted out and sailed around the world. So that when we were sailing in the Marquesas, which is a normal spot, a stop for yachts cruising, from either Hawaii or from Panama, they almost always stop in the Marquesas. And we were there in the early 1980s, and I just saw some of the most extraordinary statues that no one knows about. I mean, there's nothing like them anywhere on Earth. And it's like no one's paying attention to them. They say, archaeologists, anthropologists seem to look right over them, don't see them, and yet they're, again, the most extraordinary statues on the face of the earth. And this is an area, and I would love, and I only saw a few of them when I was down there because of, logistically, we just couldn't even get to them. And I would love to go down now and, research them, reinvestigate them now. The problem is that, traveling, do I really want to fly 20 hours or whatever down and back after already anyway, I would love to go down there and research these with the background that I've put into this. I've read everything about the Marquesas. I've probably read everything ever written about the Marquesas and Polynesia. And I would love to do this, but it's like, oh my God, how do I make this happen? It's the top of my bucket list to go back to the Marquesas sometime, while I'm still able. But this is a subject, it's so anomalous that, and so not, in my view, it is not, these are pre-Polynesian statues, and I suspect that they are relics left over from the lost civilization of Lemuria, which is another topic that I started getting into. So, yeah, at some point, yes, that's...
Wow. So can we hold, you have a couple of photos here. Can we hold these up for people?
Yeah, these are these froggy-like beings that are in a canoe, and what I find really interesting is that there's a couple of different boats like this, but to me this suggests the seven sages, the myth of the seven sages that went around the world after the great inundation, the chaos, to bring back civilization. So what in the world would they be doing in the Marquesas? And you again, you look at some of the images from Sumeria, and you definitely see a similarity.
Yeah, they're very interesting. And these two.
And these are some children that are in a house. But I mean, it's hard to get the. I mean, they're. You look at these, and it's like a group of children, each one distinctive. They're poking each other and they're prodding each other.
They almost look like the little, I think we already said this, but the Kentucky Goblins to me.
That's right. So
with their goggles.
So anyway, I've done a lot of work, and I put presentations together on both the mysterious statues in the Marquesas, as well as the mysterious ancient megaliths all throughout the South Pacific, and on Lemuria. So it's another area of interest that you guys might be interested in.
Absolutely.
So,
well, and for OSD 2026, we've got you coming, and it sounds like you might be able to tell us a little more about your research with these statues and these.
I would love to. So if anybody's interested later in a presentation on the mysterious megaliths in the Marquesas,
comment below.
I would be delighted.
Comment below or buy your tickets to OSD.
You know, I'm excited for the people at OSD to get familiar with you, because you've had a home at Ocean Shores for years now, talking about UFOs and things that you're passionate about. But the world of Sasquatch research doesn't really know about this world, and I think it's important for them to hang out with a gal like you. Plus, you're fun.
Well, you know, one of the weird things about the whole world of anomalous phenomena is, again, you have these segments. The UFO people want nothing to do with the Bigfoot people. The Bigfoot people want nothing to do with the UFO people, who want nothing to do with the crop circle people, who want nothing to do with the ghost people, who want nothing to do with the orb people, you know, and on down the line. It's like everybody seems to be stovepiped in their one little area. And I just keep thinking, my God, it's only when you begin to see this as like one big composite phenomenon, of which all of this basically come somewhere or other that's all connected. That's what really makes it exciting.
It's a tapestry. You know,
it's a tapestry.
Like the rug here. You gotta pull back to appreciate the tapestry.
That's right. That's right.
The Grand Weaver. You'll also be in the company of another future fellow colleague you haven't met yet, Dr. Simeon Hine, who's the author of Dark Matter Monsters, really into remote viewing and what he calls relic neutrinos, which are basically a long story. If you want to learn remote viewing with Dr. Simeon Hine and get into what's going on in the possible Marquesas Islands with the Lemurian
I would love to have a remote viewer look back into the past. Because again, you know, and even where they're located, it makes no sense. I mean, it's almost one of the things that struck me is that it's almost like they're hodgepodge. You know, why would you have a guy who's flying next to this ancient guy that kind of looks like it could have come from Easter Island, next to this little smiley guy with the spectacles and a goatee? I mean, it was like, what in the world? It's like there's no connection between them whatsoever, and yet they're all in one place. And it's like they've just been not dumped there, deposited there.
Thank you for your valuable time, and thanks for the wealth of information. Allie, any parting words?
Thank you. It's such a breath of fresh air to listen to someone who's so passionate about what they research.
Well, I am honored. You know, I am at that point in my life where I am just so honored. People are interested in these things. You know, they're interested in the things that I'm interested in.
Oh, how do people get in touch with you? Let's say somebody has a deeper question. Do they need to be on YouTube only, or is there a way that
email? The best way to get a hold of me would be olympic.ufo@gmail.com, and I would be delighted to continue the conversation with anybody who's interested in any part of what I've talked about.
And any future projects besides speaking? You're working on a book?
I am trying to finish a novel that I started 25 years ago. Keep losing it, and then putting it down, and then, all this other stuff comes. So I finally decide I'm going to finish it. So yes, and it's set in the South Pacific. So I'm finally determined I'm going to finish this novel that was begun many, many, many years ago. It would be almost like that will be my crowning success, actually finishing the novel. Good, bad, or indifferent, it'll be done.
Is there a working title?
Beware the Siren Song.
Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you.